Okay. Make sure this is running. Yep. Okay. Let's see how this goes. So we're going to do some management. Projects. Create a project. Pizza as a service. We'll do basic Kanban. Okay. Press the question mark key. Add a new column. In progress. Move issues here when reopened. Approved by reviewer. Create column. Add column. Pending review. In progress. Approved by pending approval by reviewer. Move pull request here when right pending approval by reviewer or newly added. Oh, that doesn't seem right. Let's see. Complete. Done. Closed. Pull request here when merged. Yeah. Search for add issues. Yeah. Manage automation on columns. I think that one is. Move pull request here when newly added. Right. So that's pending review. Then we need a new column for changes needed. Let's try this. In progress. Pending approval by reviewer. I think that is changes needed. Then complete. Archive. Cars community are board to track the progress. Archive. Automatically move your cars to the right place based on the status and activity of issues and pull requests. Archive. Manage automation. Move issues here when newly added. That's that one. So it'll tell you if they conflict. Okay, cool. Okay, so we have a Kanban board set up. Then we need to add some of our Kraken. Can't remember what we added, but I need to get on top of some of this because it's driving me crazy. Okay, that's developer stream. Okay, so I didn't actually create a board for pizza as a service. Okay, that's fine. That works. Everything was pushed last stream. So now it's just issues doesn't feel like the right place to put necessarily to-dos. I kind of want to keep a list of goals somewhere and be able to manage that properly. New project to do. Pizza for the service. Okay. So we're gonna have new card. So we're gonna ability to create submenus or categories and items for a category. As a menu creator, I want to be able to categories and items for category. So that, see if that's sufficient. These are going to be kind of light. That's the biggest problem with these. Okay. So some difficult things, some easier things that are able to be taken here. I assume we'd set price on items. Yeah, we have price on items. So we've got enough definition there. What else do we want to do? We also want to be able to as a website user, this is a tough one. As a website manager, I want not as a website manager. We don't have any personas. So when as a what are we? That's the problem. Do not have personas defined very clearly. Like I mean, here we're a restaurant manager. Maybe not if we've got multiple restaurants, right? Whereas the business owner here, or whoever is responsible for designing and setting the menus, evening, my bad. What type of diagram? It's a mind map that's being slowly morphed into some sort of plan. I'm not very good at diagramming. I never learned how to diagram, so basically this was a collaborative effort by people in the stream to come up with ideas and concepts that we might present if we were building a real system. So these have become kind of points of discussion, and now kind of last week we kind of went through and started to break these sections out. I'm just kind of using it for a reference of the pieces of the application. So over the past couple of weeks, we've kind of worked on building out several components. The aim is not to build a real system here. The aim is to build several pieces of the system to kind of discuss the uses of the technologies, introduce new technologies, have a platform for tinkering with, and also allow other people to take that and do what they want with it. Evening, Junikus, how are you? So I suppose it was a mind map, and then it became everything else. Doing good. Getting over your day. No news is good news. So I'm just trying to put some organization to some of the ideas with the service to try and get an idea of where to go next. And I'm realizing that because I've not really, I'm a little weak on. Yeah, I figured I'd move it up here because then other people can see it. So if you come along to the project and you want to see what is outstanding and what sort of things we've talked about, then we have at least somewhere to do something with. So I figured I'd try it. I mean, technically, we could actually create Kanban boards for each piece of the system, because that's the way they would be organized technically. But at this early stage, I'd rather not make it even more complicated. Yeah. I mean, I don't really have a finite end to this, I suppose, but talking with some people who think about a table side ordering feature to my stuff. Nice. Huh. That's pretty cool. Actually, the company that I got the email, like the job hunter thing from last week, was Olo. Updated to a new version of DLs, and they have a way to update orders so it could work. Nice. Yeah, it was basically a job leading the development of testing platforms within the company for the tools that they develop. So building the tools to test the tools. But I don't have any experience there, so I wasn't going forward for that job. So I was right up Mr. Anhorn Street. Yeah, yeah. I was not confident in trying to. Well, I'm not really looking for a change at this point, but it was an interesting one because it looked like a very cool tech stack. But yes. Okay, so go to code, go to issues, go to pull requests, go to actions, go to projects. Start moving a card. View all keyboard shortcuts. get myself in trouble here. Huh. It's quite interesting. You can navigate that way. So I'm trying to figure out how to describe these things properly, and try and keep them business focused. So in this case, there's too much involved here. That's the challenge. How do I add an issue? Manage. That's fine. Create. Add cards. Okay. Oh, there's a plus right there. I'm an idiot. I was trying to figure out the keyboard shortcut. You had issues and issues when creating them. So yeah. So I want to be able to add the cards here. The issues we can create as actual issues. I prefer to do it that way. So the things that we're kind of planning and have an idea of go in here. Issues can be added if there's issues found during code that we need to resolve in the stream or something. So in this instance, what I want to say is, as a the problem is the business value here is kind of thin, because it's technically, as a user, when I register, I should register. Kinda. I want to describe some of these pieces. This is, to begin with, this is mainly for me so that we've got some context of what I want to do on the stream. But I'm also keeping track of it publicly so that anybody can see what we're actually aiming to do. So I'm trying to describe why I'm doing it, but I don't think it's possible to at this point, because we don't have enough about personas, and we're not trying to do the full real design here. This is basically when a user registered or an account registered event is received, an account should be created on the website. So right now it just creates a record in I suppose it does want you to create issues, doesn't it? Because you can tag issues. Let's convert it to an issue. Yeah. Issues are the right way to go. If. Because I can label them. I can't label or assign them while they're in items in there. Yeah. Okay, so let's have a look at this. So this is labels. Feature. And identity should be added to the here's how we need to do it as well. Categories, customer interactions. Right, so we can categorize it properly. Identity should be added to the website project, and an account registered when any email customer. Link. Allow customer to set password. Enforce password strength. Testing XML. Ouch. Anytime you get to parsing XML, if you're doing string comparisons or you're doing, however you're doing it, I used to query the XML and get the, use link, and which would immediately validate if it was broken because it wouldn't be able to navigate it, but then kind of use link to validate the XML. I haven't done that in a long time. Oh. My daughter just pointed out that it was funny that we had a pizza for dinner and I'm writing about pizza as a service. Gotcha. Identity should be added to the website purchase, and when a customer sign up is complete, receive the account registered event. Then a new user should be registered for the email, first name, surname. Introduce identity. Actually, can I make an actual list out of this? Okay, so it's Markdown, I'm sorry. Being dense. False password strength. Numbers. Case. I don't know what the right way. I assume it's ASP.NET identity. WebAssembly authentication, Blazor authentication authorization. Yeah, it's ASP.NET Core. I know that it's a little bit more convoluted. Do you think this in this kind of project, OpenID might be a more fitting solution, rather than storing it inside of the website itself? Well, don't forget that this is not the entire system. You only get this component of the system to deal with, and that's the idea. The users here only get to go here. They don't get beyond this. Everything that comes out of this section is nothing to do with identity, because this is gateway to user entry. So when I make an order, those authentication details don't need to go beyond this, because I don't need to be authenticated against a different system. Now, if we're talking about potential clients for making ordering, so if we make mobile clients off of this, then yes, then a more robust solution might be. Yeah, this is not identity. Each individual component, like identity could be a component unto itself, right? Because we might have employees log in and orders log in, inventory, billing. All these systems might have, you might have rights to see different components of the system. So there might be a management system that all these parts live, produce data for. So, yeah. But in this instance, I'm not talking about the wider system. I'm talking about this. So having identity seems like a practical solution for right now, rather than overcomplicating it and creating a more complicated. Now, if what I'd like to get to with this project, I think, is definitely the realm of, okay, well, someone knows, kind of like what we've done with you and Mr. Anhorn with the Docker thing, you know, it's an opportunity to say, hey, we've got a technology that would fit here. Let's see what it would be to implement that, and let's do it in a stream. And learn something from that. A few of the things I've had ideas for is things like GraphQL. This might give us enough data and ideas to test with. So with the mobile app, but the mobile app's more personally directed, right? So this is more general. You can pick it up and play with it in any way you choose. But there might be good teaching moments. Yeah, I've yet to see it. So what I'm trying to do is fill this out enough to. So I think this is ASP.NET Core Identity. Email customer with a confirmation link. Allow customer to set password. Enforce password strength. We're not going to worry about two-factor. We're not going to worry about those pieces. They just overkill right the second. So let's comment that. Okay. Can I edit that? Yes, I can edit that. Okay. So that's that. Let's go back here and do as a menu creator. So this label is feature. And this is a menu. I gotta be careful. Menu management. Good evening, Mr. Anhorn. How are you? Okay, so we got that. How's things? How did the stream go last night? Okay, so we hard-coded the menu items in the software. But now we want to be able to produce an actual menu. As a creator, I should be able to configure the items and categories along with prices. Very good. Did not plan it well. Decided on removing TS from the old editor, moving toward the full C# editor. Nice. Planning? You plan things? I kind of get an idea, and then just run with it. I know. And I guess it shows. As a creator, should be able to configure the items and categories along with the prices. My problem is, if I start thinking about stuff, then all of a sudden, before I know, the time's upon me for streaming, and I haven't really had any time to do the planning part. So I do like that downtime. And I spent far too long playing Assassin's Creed this weekend. I'm now 21 hours into the game. We hard-coded the menu items in software, but now we want to be able to produce an actual menu. As a creator, should be able to configure the items and categories along with the prices and descriptions. We need descriptions. We might have to do this evening because, do part of this evening because we got to do refactoring here. So actually, this requires a new issue as a. So I don't need to do the ASA. We're not doing real stories. Menu items are copied time and time again, multiple times. Perhaps appropriately. So the challenge here is what is this? Enhancement. Is enhancement? Help wanted, invalid. So, kept copying and pasting the menu code around the system, but it should probably be different. Otherwise, someone will come along and create a common library, which would be bad. And would create ties between sections that are unwanted. So this is the problem of, we have menu items in here, we have menu items in here, we publish them out on Kafka, and we keep consuming them and storing them and passing them around, but we just keep recreating the menu items. And at some point someone's going to go, that's just a common library. But that creates a link between these two pieces, which we don't want a direct link. That's why we're using the services. That's why we're disconnecting things. Also, my Hat Day project is going awesome as well. I'm injecting experimentation, A/B testing into our new React application. Nice. Wow. You are a busy person. I'm doing precisely nothing cool other than this. This is the coolest thing I can do right this second. So we might have to take this one this evening. Does that go in there automatically? I bet it doesn't. No. Okay, so I have to assign it to the project as well. Projects. Pizza as a service. Okay. Now, does this give me any ability to boards? Create a synced board. It just does not give me access to TBD friends through this. That's a shame. All right. So now, the reason I started off with doing this is because obviously this is a project that I want to be able to have anybody tinker with or put ideas in for. It isn't aimed at being a complete system, just a system with to the organization. Do you maybe need that? It is at the organization level. It is. Let me just make sure I'm not about to show something. So I go to the TBD Friends organization, and I go to third-party access. Gitkraken is approved. So I'm not sure what else I need to do. I can switch to me and authorize GitHub. Hold on, I don't get the third-party access. Go to me. On an individual level, I don't get third-party access as a thing. So I only get it at the TBD Friends level. That's weird. It'd be nice to be able to see the cards in here. That's all I'm trying to achieve. TBD Friends. Let's see if it'll let me. What would that be? Pass projects. Huh. I don't know. I don't know how to do this. Edit project. Is that project? Just be nice. It's not necessary. It's just it would be nice to be able to sync them so I can actually use the tool without actually having to have GitHub open. And then I can assign pull requests and stuff to issues from within here. Does not seem like I can do that. Okay. Anyway. Huh. Anyway, that doesn't really matter. That's not the hardest thing I've got to do. So I think if we can start to refactor some of that menu stuff, then that becomes a little easier, and then we can take on the menu story. So let's do this. In progress. So this is number 3. So we're going to go and create a branch. And we're going to create a branch. This is going to be feature 3. Okay. So if you remember, what we did is in the Kafka piece, we ended up with the menu, the item, and the category. In the customers piece, I think we ended up with the menu, item, and the category. No, the customer website, we ended up with it. So customer interactions, we have menu, item, and category. They're the same exact model because we consume it that way. And then in the page, in the menus page, we take the menu, the item, and the category, and we're actually using that directly. So it's essentially the same model. We just copied it into 2 different places. Hey, Bitmasher, how you doing? Long time no see. How's things been going? Busy. I hear you. Yeah. You've been avoiding Twitch, or just the busyness has kept you even away from Twitch? Taking care of puppy. Nice. Okay. Yep. Okay, so what we're going to figure out here is there a correct actually, is there a correction I can make here? I've written it and I believe it, but the challenge is to deserialize it. I need the same shape, right? That's without a doubt. So the Kafka consumer, actually, it's in 3 places, obviously, because the menu website, when we publish the menu, we have it here, right? So technically, we have it in 3 places. We just kind of left it in place here and put all the Kafka stuff directly in here. So we do have some more refactoring to do. So right now we have it essentially twice in this piece and once in this piece, right? It's the same model time and time again repeated. Welcome back. And here's our first challenge. Well, kind of diagrams. So this is a mind map that's changed into kind of a project plan as it goes. It's a little bit more on the fly. So we're tinkering with stuff a couple of streams ago now. Hey, Two Salty Clowns, how are you? And the idea is this is not meant to be any formal design. It's not meant to be a product. It's not meant to be anything other than an app for tinkering with. So the idea was, we've talked about different technologies on stream. We've talked about different tools on stream. But how do we bring things together, and what sort of challenges do we face in doing that? So there's no formality to this, which is why this diagram is kind of, broken out into sections, and it's a mind map, etc. So what we have running is, show it. We have a few pieces. Okay, so we have our welcome to pass. And we can register a user. And localhost 5002. Yes, okay. So we can register a user, Bob Jones, bjones at jonesmail.com. That doesn't do very much other than you can see it over here. So basically we have multiple components of the system listening to these things. So when I submit that sends a command to say register this account. That gets picked up by the customers component of the system, which is down here, and registers the actual account. It then publishes that an account was registered, right? And the loyalty system picks it up, but also the website picks it up, and then we'll go on to actually create an account for the user to log in as. Now we know that user has been accepted by the system. The other part we have is, if I can actually click on something, we can create menus. So we can create the Tuesday menu, right? And then if we go over here and go to menus, we have the early bird, the all day, the simple menu. We should have very shortly the Tuesday menu if things are working. Oh no, we had some errors with Bootstrap. There we go. Okay, so this is failing because of a quirk with the way we're doing the Docker images. Basically, if we bring Docker down while the containers are up, when they start up, they don't re-establish properly. So if I go over here and do Docker, Docker compose, actually, we do need infra because it's not a standard Docker file. Docker down. We'll bring them down. And then bring them up again. We should see these re-establish. And then we should be able to create our Tuesday menu. And there's our Tuesday menu, right? Now, obviously, every single broker was down then, so it didn't save anything. But basically, what we're trying to do is give some idea of how these things might come together, give an application that people can tinker with and take and make their own if they want to, but also a general idea. So in GitHub, we have Pizza as a Service, PaaS, in regular daylight mode. This reads a little easier. This is the original diagram. and it's got some basics. But the idea is you can clone this repository and then just run the Docker Compose infra file and be up and running and tinkering with code in minutes. And what we're doing this evening is kind of going through some of the issues. But the issues is right now MongoDB, RabbitMQ, Mass Transit, and Kafka, and all those pieces. Okay. Why Rabbit and Kafka? So, well, Mass Transit is the service bus. So Mass Transit is being used as a distributed eventing and message sending system, and Kafka is a publishing system. And we're just trying to use the tools differently and see how we might actually use them and what the challenges are. We might introduce other technologies. There's no specific choice. Just these are the technologies I've used. I'm not by any means an expert in any of these. I'm just trying to explore them and look at the challenges we face. So right now what's happening is when you create a user, we send a register user command which gets picked up by customers. So that's a point-to-point command, and then this publishes a user registered event, or an account registered event, sorry, and then the marketing system picks that up and the website picks that up. With the menu, there's no specific command. There's just, here's the current state of the menu. So we use Kafka for that because that's just publishing the data. There's no message, there's no intent in Kafka, unless you actually wrap it up yourself. Hey, Dota, how are you? So we're just kind of using the different technologies and exploring their uses so we can discuss them. You know, again, you can tinker with them and take what you want from this project. But also it gives us a chance to look at some of the challenges you might face if you're developing these things. And they seem pretty simple, and they're not. Like the one we're about to face. So yeah. You know, also gives me a chance to tinker with some of these pieces while we're on stream. I'll learn what I do not know. So you can always get to there by pizza. Doesn't say when I've assigned it though, does it? Because I dragged that to in progress. I can assign that to me. There you go, okay. So trying to build out some issues. Dota, this does require, this piece does need some discussion before those others can technically be taken. Otherwise they may cause conflicts. You don't want to end up with conflicts there. So, but getting there, trying. So the challenge this evening is, if you have, well, these aren't small issues right now. These are kind of bigger issues. We can worry about the styling or the design, or how to build these pieces out. But the pieces right now that I'm concerned with is a challenge that might seem kind of simple, but it's kind of important. So the goal of this system, if you imagine this in a world where these aren't necessarily all the same teams developing the software, and they can build and they can change independently. Now, the reality is some of these pieces may be run by the same team, but they could be distributed, right? They could scale independently. They can, they all have different requirements. They could all use different technologies, potentially. So the one challenge we face is when we want to send messages, right? Common contracts need to be given, right? Now, for the commands and events, I kind of create shared libraries. I'm not certain that's the best way of doing it, but I kind of see the mass transit service bus aspect of this as being, if I'm publishing that and I'm consuming that, then that's okay, right? That's okay for me to share a common library, because all it is, run into issues with that design of sharing the library, or where something lives. Okay. Oh, sorry about that. I don't think I'm dropping frames. Nope. Okay. Oh no. Yeah, I'm basically just giving Unicus the time to write out whatever necessary to write there. Kind of what I'm going to discuss. I'm going to discuss this in a minute. I just don't want to rush ahead and talk over Unicus's his thoughts on this, because I've seen different solutions and I'm interested to know other people's opinions all out. So while I'm giving Unicus a chance to do something there, let me just stop running this so I can free up some resources. So I initially thought sharing a library that was a contract that would work, but when adding things, I had to keep thinking on how it was used. I had models that were used for in and out of the service, and the consumer cared about part of the model. Right. Yep. So now I have a share. Now I have them separate and run into a different issue with mass transit and then the namespace clashing. Yes. Right. So mass transit definitely. The mass transit is a little bit harder there, because mass transit in combination with RabbitMQ will. Which one is it? 9,000. HTTP 9,000. That's CMAC. That's a different thing. That's for our Kafka monitoring. It's 5672, right? HTTP protocols 15672. There we go. And that's guest and admin and guest. Guest. There you go. Guest. Thinking that in mass transit I might serialize a payload to a string instead of passing a model. So mass transit creates these, right? And then you end up with the topics and the bindings to the actual types. Well, we're tinkering, right? So, well, this is kind of why I'm mixing a little bit. So, well, it's kind of meant to be a little bit rigid. So I kind of consider mass transit as kind of an internal messaging system where the systems know what they're talking about, right? So the global system as a whole has it knows what commands and events are being sent around the system, right? So that's kind of like the shared library works for that. The only thing you've got to kind of measure is who owns what. It is pretty quick, isn't it? I don't know why that is. I don't know why it intercepts it that fast. Because you get used to reading it off the screen. So register customer as a command can only come from one place. You can't have register customer coming from multiple places. That would kind of defeat the point. You have a source and you have a destination. When it's an event, they're published to other pieces, and each piece takes what it needs from that event, but that event is published to be, here's the data that I'm willing to share externally, right? You can do exclamation pizza if you want this project. I noticed that if I put exclamation pizza in the stream title, I get more views, but I don't think people are expecting quite what I'm doing. So I've not put exclamation pizza in the stream title. I don't want to I don't want to bait people in on a false premise that I'm doing something cool with food. So I kind of see mass transit as an internal, the service bus as an internal component. I don't know, but I definitely got more viewers when I did exclamation pizza. So I think it's okay for a shared library to exist to expose the events and commands of the system. But again, you have to determine who owns what data. You can publish data out of there. Yeah, they do. You can publish more data than everyone needs. We built on some of the data objects, but one of the challenges we're going to come up against this evening is this thing we're discussing now, right? So right now we have a different challenge, but let's finish this one first. So mass transit shares a library, right? We have commands and events as shared libraries. These are just DTOs. There's no complexity to these, but this comes from this piece. Now we could break them down a little bit by their source, but for right now I think this gives us the idea. There's not a lot of logic right this second, Dota, but I'll go into it in a second if you give me a chance. Account registered as an event, it's published. This piece down here will publish out whatever information it's willing to share with the wider system. It doesn't matter if this system needs all that information or this system needs none of that information or this system needs half of that information, right? You publish out enough information that everybody should be able to pick up what they need from that piece. And the reason I see mass transit as internal is because those sorts of discussions have to happen inter-team, right? Oh, I need this data. Okay, so is that best represented by an event, or does it exist as part of a current event? And, if we publish it, then everyone has to update the libraries, but they can discard 50% of the information. I think those discussions have to go on because all the people involved in the domain need to know about these things. right? You can't solve all those problems. And the messaging platforms and the rigidness that Bitmash is talking about, I think actually is why that is that way, because it's it shouldn't be that easy to change. On the flip side, the menu stuff that we're about to go through is using Kafka, because as we kind of talked about the other week, the fact that a menu is available it's not really a command that gets sent anywhere, and it's not really an event that happened. It's there's data available, right? So Kafka publishes the menu in its current state, and anybody who cares about the menu can pull that menu and do what they want with it, right? If we upgrade that menu in the future, right, then if we share a library, this challenge comes in that, you know, okay, we've now got to change our models. So, and that's where we're going to get it stuck. Now, Kafka has a solution for this, or rather, there is a wider solution in the schema registry, which can use Avro serialization. It can also version things, and it can also kind of help you produce new versions of your message as long as they're backwards compatible. And a consuming system can still consume the message in the format they would originally consume it in until they're ready to update, if they get to that point. So Kafka has, or you can add it in the schema registry component of Kafka. We've talked about that before, and I've never really managed to get it working. Right, so we might have to talk about, okay, what do we do in the interim? I have seen people use Kafka for messaging, but they basically do something similar to what actually Mass Transit is doing internally with RabbitMQ, in that it's creating a message envelope, and it puts that into Kafka, because Kafka is a key value based system. It puts that message envelope in there, and a consuming system needs to have all the parts around it to pull out a message, which means you're back to the shared library and using it as a bus. So I'm not a big fan of doing that with Kafka. So I kind of prefer Kafka to be, here's data. If you care about it, you can get it, right? It also gives us that resilience in that it can retain data in Kafka, whereas Mass Transit doesn't. Once it's consumed, it's gone. And if you haven't told the system I care about the data, it's gone. It's kind of point in time stuff, whereas this data being available is useful for everybody. So Dota, the logic so far, we have, so right now we've got the code organized by roughly the segments that I'm kind of breaking down into the diagram, right? So the customer interactions, the customer system over here, the marketing system over here, and the menu management system over here. So we have customer interactions, customer, marketing, and menu. Customer interactions, the website is, right now the code's in the actual Razor pages, right? In the Blazor components. And here we send the register account message, or command, right? And what this does is sends that command, and the customer system, which is configured to be a Mass Transit consumer, will take that, and we have the register account consumer, which is the receiving end of that register account command. Commands, point to point, events, pub/sub, right? So in here, all we do is we create a new customer, we store it in our MongoDB for right now, and then we publish an event that is account registered. In the marketing system, the loyalty component of the marketing system, we have a consumer for account registered consumer, where we just output it on the screen, right? Right now, we're not doing anything there. It's just more of a demonstration of these pieces working at the same time. So this consumer picks up that message and does nothing with it, really. The website is also a consumer of the account registered consumer, and right this second, it creates a record in another MongoDB. It's a different DB, of that customer. One of the items in the backlog there is, and that's why I say they're a bit big. This is to introduce ASP.NET Core identity, and when we get that account registered event back, this would actually set up that and manage that, because the user will log into here. The user doesn't get rights beyond here. The user is in this piece here. Everything up until this evening is pushed, yes. Now, what we're talking about here is a small refactoring of some of these pieces. So that's why I'm saying you might want to just pay attention to what we're doing so you understand. Do git fetch upstream. That will fetch changes down. Yes, because you forked it. Yes, you forked it, right? I'm not used to the GitHub flow. I've not played with forks in Git. Right this second I am, yes. This is a new branch to make sure that I don't pollute the main if I get this wrong. So the way I style it is feature / and the number of the feature. So you should be able to see, okay, he's gone feature 3, there's feature 3, right? Right. I'm not used to using GitHub. Yep. I don't like trying to do too much with this code off stream, because if I do too much, my ideas are in there and not everybody else's thoughts and opinions. That's what I'm trying to build here. I'm not trying to build a 100% functional application. I'm trying to make sure that people have an opportunity to, oh, well, I think it should work this way, or, well, why don't we do it this way, or, that's wrong. Okay, teach me a better way, right? So the goal is not to be, I am the expert, follow me and watch this happen. The goal is to make a system. Yeah. So right this second, we have these models in, as we just identified, technically. Hey, Larita, how are you doing? Good evening. We have these models in three, is it 3 distinct places? 3 distinct places. Ooh, hot chocolate. That sounds good. Fetch from upstream, merge to origin, and deal with conflicts. How does forking work? Does it create a different remote? One that you've got permissions to? Because you have to do a pull request to get a change merged into the main again. But you do it against your fork. You do your changes against your fork. And I've definitely not done this with command. Okay. Oh dear. So nice. How would you consider? So considering what I've talked about, right? We have these menu item and category in 3 distinct places. What, this stuff? You mean? Yeah. Well, yeah. And a lot of this stuff is not stuff I would genuinely do the way I'm doing it now. So ultimately what would happen is we'd actually use Mediator for local level messaging and sending of data so that we could actually break some of these down into unit testable components, right? So registering, sending a menu shouldn't actually be done within the web page. It should be done in its own handler that we can unit test and mock out the requirements for, so we can verify when we say add a menu, these things happen, and then we can validate the data and do all those things. But we've got to get to that point where we're all comfortable doing those things. Again, the but that's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about how do we do this? How do we accurately do we build this system so we can talk about the problems with it and the things you might do differently, and not have to worry. Yeah. Okay, so right this second, the challenge is we have models folder in the website, a models folder in the consumer, and technically a models folder in here, but they're currently dumped inside the code. What is the best solution for dealing with them? Because we have 3 different projects that actually require the models for the menu. Is it right to store them in a common place? Well, like I just said, Kafka really does disconnect these things, right? So there's a quick solution we can use. Well, the problem is as things change, that sort of decision, if you don't figure out the challenge there, the problem, and come up with a solution that everybody can live with for now, and you just kind of do the easiest thing, that's the sort of decision you'll move on from real fast and then create a maintenance nightmare for yourself down the road, because that pattern will get copied. And that's one of the big things I've seen is if you do something once and someone comes along to that code with no knowledge of that code, you created a pattern. Because most people will not stop and ask or stop and question. They'll copy the pattern because it gets the job done. Even if they care about the code, but they don't quite understand it, they'll copy the pattern. So not only are you creating a bit of a maintenance nightmare to repeat that pattern because it's easier, but you're also potentially setting a standard you didn't intend to set. But the challenge, obviously, right now is we have menus here, which we publish. That's another question, right? So are they really the same model? Well, we don't know any better at this point, right? So I have one possible solution to this that cuts the problem down a little bit, but doesn't perfect it for right this second. I'm building a decision based upon the fact that we are in control of all the pieces right now. Well, and technically that's what it is, right? That's what they are right this second. They are menus. What we can do is break the pattern a little bit in one of 2 ways, and at least it makes it easier for us to manage and easier for us to maintain. So let's start by moving this, not bringing up that. Let's start by bringing up this folder. And if you disagree with how I'm doing it, just let me know. That's why we're doing this. Okay, so let's move this to models. No. Oh, you're just not gonna make it easy, are you? Menu. Jump back there. Gotta cut them out of there. Paste that in there. Do that. Move to another file. to another file. So the reality is, this is if this was 17, yeah, it would be, and that's why I'm kind of considering mass transit as the internal bus, and those contracts can be agreed upon, right? Those messages can be agreed upon. We will publish this data. Oh, we need this data. Well, we're not the source of that data, right? These conversations have to happen. You can't build any of this in a vacuum. You need communication between teams. You need to understand the challenges that each team is facing. You need to provide the right data. Yes, that's the truth. Now, with, like I said, with Kafka, you can attach serialization, so the messages come out and the consuming system can say, oh, I care about that message now, I can have that. So that you write some code and it will actually generate the models for you off of that serialized format. That's the goal, that you kind of say, okay, create the model, and it creates the model. If that model updates, it's versioned, and we can publish a different version of the model as long as we support the backward compatibility. So it forces the publisher of the message to always consider the compatibility of the message, but a consumer can guarantee that as long as that message is being published, you can consume it. And that's Judicus's point. They are different, right? We got to ask, are they really the same model? And that's kind of what I'm going to go into here. I'm just tidying this up a little bit. Gamer. No. It's a menu. That's a menu. Using models. Yeah, that's right. Don't know why I did that, but whatever. Menu. There you go. So that's a little tidier. I want to do add new item. Disc golf. A consumer can attach. You can actually create transforms. So you can actually use KSQL DB to transform a stream of data into a different topic. So you could consume the topic stream, the menu stream, and produce a completely different topic. Yes, you can manipulate it in real time. Not that I want to do that right this second, but you can do it. And that's not what's the word for, is it gloss? Do I mean glossary? An alphabetical list of terms or words found in a right? No. What's the ubiquitous language? What's the name for that document? Let's just call it terms. Okay, but the schema in the original stream stays the same. It's more like a split the stream. Yeah. Yeah, you publish the original topic. That's the published topic. But you could also take two topics and merge them into one output topic if you so chose. I haven't seen that working yet. That's kind of what we're looking at with event streaming not so long ago. Okay, a menu. A menu is a top level item grouping a set of categories with items. It can have a time of day. Yeah, I'm trying to put the. Oh, again, I'm trying to avoid the word domain as much as I can to try and stop us going into the DDD. Because if I start saying that this is DDD in any way, then the people that are really into DDD will pick us apart in the ways that I don't really want to get bogged down in. We are essentially doing we're doing the dumb modeling of that system, and we are actually identifying some of those pieces, but we're not trying to put too many terms around them. You'll see the parallels, you'll see the pieces. I just don't want to get too involved in that because it's a bit of a minefield. Because then it's well, you're not doing this the right way, you're not doing that the right way, you're not doing this, you're not talking about this correctly, and I don't want to. I haven't studied DDD enough to say I can competently take that on right this second. It can have a time of day. Which book are you studying? Most DDD books are hard to understand and apply because of this exact problem. The Blue Book, the original one, the Eric Evans book. Yeah, good luck. That's exactly my problem. This is exactly why I'm trying to do stuff like this, is to try and explore the ideas without touching on DDD, so that I can draw more parallels. And I've always struggled because the business I'm in doesn't really have a domain that I can identify, and I've tried multiple times, and the business I came from struggled to actually put labels around these things. And to be quite honest, in one stream when we did this, some of those things made more sense to me than they've ever done. No joke. Because all of a sudden I saw it, I'm like, okay. I've put the boxes around them to try and separate them by kind of behavior right this second, but this is it starts to okay, I kind of get some of these ideas now, but I'm working from the technology angle rather than the definition angle because it's easier for me to think about. But the Blue Book is a good book. It's just really hard to kind of grasp. I've actually tried reading. I've got the Pact Publishing one. That one I've got 4 chapters through solidly. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, identifying the domains is and I've actually done a course with Vaughan Vernon, who has written several books. Yeah, it can have an odd time of day or availability. A category. No. Yeah, actually, you can have that. What people normally consider the menu is a collection of menus, each with early bird, dinner. I'm putting this here because I just deleted the comment out of the menu Razor page, and I want to make sure that some of this information is not totally lost so that I have it to refer to if we're talking about it. And someone's like, that's not a menu. That's what we've determined is a menu. Entrees, pizzas, pastas, etc. An item, actual item with description, name, description, and price associated. Well, we can flex some of these ideas. We can talk about where price attaches, how price attaches. Obviously, we've talked about costings and things like that. But for right now, we need to build some of these concepts out so we can revisit them and again use the same language to talk about them, so we all know what we're talking about. Okay, so let's close that down. And I have a feeling my machine might actually overheat. It's saying it's cool, but the fans are going nuts. Let's stage that file. Added terms file to help describe concepts. So now some of it will, so this stuff will live in a handler. This will be a command that is sent, and this system will deal with sending the of linking up the Kafka pieces. Yeah, so we'll introduce mediator, and this will send a command internally. So obviously there's a shared commands and events. There would be commands and events at the menu level as well. As we've seen, we end up with menu commands and menu commands and menu queries probably. Why wouldn't it be in a series of classes? Well, technically it is. But the design the CQRS style breaks down that design into components of behavior. So the sending of a command, the sending of a menu, or the publishing of a menu, the producing of a menu, comes from. So handlers are. So 2 ways of doing this initially. I'm not going to jump to code I've already written. We're going to write some new code. So we need a console app. So a couple of ways you would write this. Okay, so let's do var int var idx equals 1. No, I'll do that. Let's do var number of items equals 10. For each var item for int idx equals 0, idx is less than number of items. Hold on. And then we do console.writeLine number of items, right? So there's our function. Doesn't really matter what it does, how it does it, right? So we want to break that out into new code. So one way people would do it is we might create the items service. Okay, and then we have public void output number of items, int number of items. So then we move this code in here, and we, instead of doing this, we go var items service equals new new items service, and we say item service to output number of items 10, right? So now we've kind of broken the logic out. We can test it, but now we've got another system where we, okay, so public void do something else, right? So now we've created a bundled class of behavior, which isn't terrible necessarily, but you've got all your behavior in here, and it becomes a dumping ground, right? So this becomes kind of generic, right? So, oh, it's an item. It goes in the item service. Oh, how many items are there, right? Public int, how many items are there, right? Return 0, right? So it becomes a bit of a dumping ground. So another way of doing this is when we want to do something is to use that CQRS pattern. So we create commands and handlers for them. So we have the public class output number of items, which is a command, right? Or a request in the terms of mediator, int number of items, right? And we create a handler, public class, the output number of items handler, which is a handler, and handler void void handle t command. This is going to be a handler of output number of items, right? And then we copy this logic here in here. So now, now we need this, because the command is actually going to specify the number of items. It's a request to do something, just the same way as it was here. And now the challenge to this is, you need wiring up of this. That's the big challenge. So you've broken down, I mean, ultimately, internally, it's going to do this. Var handler equals new number of items handler, right? It's then going to say handler dot handle new output number of items equals 10, right? The benefit of it is, realistically, you don't ever see this. You just see the send, and the wire up of doing this handle is done somewhere else. So you just, from a line of code in yours, you see mediator.send new output number of items, right? Your system's being descriptive, your code is nice and clean, and it's doing one thing and one thing well. It's unit testable. It doesn't become a dumping ground because there's a clear pattern. You can read all the at a glance, you can see all the things the system does because you can read all the commands, and you can see the handlers. So if you're looking for the updates, the number of items, or the how many items are there, they're going to be there as commands. Mediator refers to them as requests and handles. They handle a command, or they handle a request. Unfortunately, it's a bit of an overloaded term, right? Because handlers is also associated with events. Yeah, I'm not too au fait with the Redux stuff, so it's not a little hard for me to glance at and see the parallels. Hey, Long Curiosity, how are you doing? We are working on this project. So this project is a distributed system experiment, I suppose. This evening we're working on a bit of refactoring, tidying up some code, building out the project a little bit more. But the idea is it is a discussion project, and it's pizza as a service. So this is the whole stuff we've talked about so far. If you have any interest or any questions, feel free. For anyone joining, we do have a Discord as well, where you're more than welcome to ask any further questions or discuss any of the things we talk about on stream. Service is a series of classes. Well, service is a single class that does a thing in that example code. So item service is a kind of a wrapping term for grouping the behavior together. Like I said, this is one way of approaching that design, is to create a thing that does it, which means you can disconnect your front end from your back end, right? You can still disconnect it using the service, but the problem is the service becomes, you have to be very strict about how you lay out the service, and things can get lost in there, or the class file can become a little bit more of a mixed bag of behavior. This diagram accurate? Let's have a look. Oh, I can copy and paste a curly brace. Okay, CQRS bus, UI presentation, command handler, domain storage, event handler, query storage, queries, simple DAL. Yeah, essentially, yeah. We send a command. They're mixing the message bus and stuff. So that's why I kind of don't like using terms. It's because, you know, we end up with a different understanding of the same terms. But in essence, it's the same thing. We are separating the command, query, responsibility, separation. Internally, what Mediator's doing, and we've actually done this on stream, if you remember. I don't know if you were around for this. We actually created Arbiter. So Arbiter was a one-stream 14 months ago. Arbiter was a one-stream project where we wrote our own Mediator library and introduced 2 different IOC containers into it. And we could send commands and have handlers, so add numbers as well. And we actually created the entire code. So we created a Mediator library. So Mediator is the pattern. Mediator is the library that we use most, because reinventing wheels. In my site, my command handler is injected in the query. I'm running the UI. Okay. Wow, 14 months ago. Okay. Okay, so that was a slight diversion. That's okay. Which is what you said earlier. So instead of putting it there, I should put it in by the. So the way we're going to do this, I'm kind of. So what will happen is, right now we have our logic, our business logic is living right in the UI layer. Right. What we're going to do is separate that out into Yeah, something will handle it. It just helps for unit testing, for keeping the concerns where they need to be, and disconnecting the whole thing a little bit. So Mediator isn't working too differently to end-service with mass transit in this instance, right? It is still dealing that command, that register account, is a command, just the same way as on a local level, Mediator will send the request, aka command. I still think of them as commands because when it does something, it says do this thing, and when I query I actually use query, so they don't, in that diagram, they separate out query here. I actually use this piece to do the queries as well, because they kind of neatly wrap up I want this versus do this, and it can return data as well. So maybe that's a choice that Jimmy Bogard made when he designed that, but it is something I wanted to do anyway, in my own version of that. So I wrote the Mediator library before I even knew about Mediator as a pattern, because I don't focus on patterns. Yeah. So, but in this diagram, that's kind of splitting the line, right? They're distinguishing queries, simple DAL. Well, I'm kind of using the command handler component there to go and get me data and return it in the Mediator library. This looks a little bit more like mass transit in terms of its behavior, but yeah. My biggest problem is I'm always I don't focus on the terminology, more the doing of something. So I'm always behind the curve when it comes to, is this a X or Y? Oh, it does a thing. So ultimately, what we do is we create some libraries. I don't want to do them on this branch because it'll start to make a mess. But this code, this create menu would actually be the request, right? And the fact that it publishes to Kafka would be none of the website's business specifically. It would know about it because it's part of the application stack, but it would, this page. Where's my phone going nuts? Okay. So let's see, 9 o'clock. Okay. Let's see if we can get this organized. So we have broken out these into their own file just to keep it clearer. So we got two choices at this level, right? So customer interactions as a thing needs no worries. The customer interactions as a concept, as a grouping, as a domain, subdomain, needs the menu. But to your point, Unicus, just because this part consumes it as this form doesn't mean this part needs it as this form, right? The problem I'm having right this second is I'm not quite sure what we collapse differently, right? So technically, as long as this can consume it, so we're turning around and publishing the same thing, or we're storing the same thing that we're consuming, right? A menu, so we're storing it as an object in Mongo, but then we're turning around and needing that exact same thing to pull out of Mongo, and we're displaying it. So essentially we're just passing it around as that object. Whereas if we consider them as DTOs, then that's kind of not ideal. Now the consumer service might do different things to it, but I'm not quite sure what. So I don't have a reason to believe it would at this point. So what I'm considering is trying to collapse the gap between these two. No, actually, there is one minor difference, and we kind of came across this. This will actually help us. So this is what we consume out. right? Um, there's never a time when we as a system will ever need to change what this menu is specifically, right? If the menu is changed, we will be told about the menu changing. So let's say on this side, a menu has categories and items, right? An item has a value, and an item can potentially live on multiple menus or multiple categories. It could exist in as part of many different menus, and those menus are available at different time. Files. Why won't you? Because I'm gonna have to pull the pull request to get the file. Can I see the raw file? Raw. Uh, view file. Yeah. A bit around the houses, but yeah, that's what I did. Control. Uh, which one? That one. So you're thinking your mind is considering this as kind of um, a React application and how it deals with the behavior of the actual data flow. Right. Where that logic lives. Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, I don't. Again, Redux and stuff. we played with the Angular equivalent, but I've never really tried it with React and never really got my head around that piece. But essentially, the goal is the same, right? The goal is break your behavior away from other pieces. This mutation, yes, because they're not a pipeline. They're not pipeline. They are, well, they can be, but they aren't in this instance. They are very much, I do a thing. And it's that goal of breaking your behavior into pieces that helps the system be more understandable. So I'm a big fan of readability and maintainability over technical excellence, I suppose. It can be the nicest and most amazing code you've ever seen, and it won't make any sense to anybody else. And I kind of guess when you're talking about a large system, that's key, right? Redux, you have a dispatch. This is what the mediator is. And you give it an action. In Redux, an action is like action type payload data. That is like a command. And a reducer takes that action and changes the state as a handler, handles a command, and actually changes the state. Okay. Yeah, I think the reasons for doing things and the hows are slightly. I see there's parallels. I definitely see that there's clear behavioral parallels, but the and maybe we can get to a point where you're able to develop a component of the system as, yeah. Raw. I'm trying to get to. I don't want to lose track of where I am. That's the big problem. Oh no. Oh, wow, that's cool. You can drag them as components. Okay. All right, so draw IO installed as well. Okay, so command handler, control engine classes, they do different. Yeah, they do different things. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, UI UX. So this is the React version, and this is you kind of mapping out what we're doing, what we're talking about here. Yeah, they're not piped functions. They are very much they terminate. Like, one of the biggest advantages I've seen from this design style so far is the ability to kind of chain behavior together. So if you actually have update this item, update this piece as a command, right? Multiple things can send that command. It doesn't always have to originate from the UI UX. If it actually is a component of behavior of the system, they can be sent from different places and chained together essentially. But it doesn't really become a pipeline as such. It's more, you know, it's a good way of breaking up the system into behavior. I think that's one of the struggles I have with the whole Redux thing is I'm just in one layer of the entire application. I'm not even talking about the server side, but I'm updating state so that I don't have to, like here we're not concerned with how the data is represented while we go off and do other things, right? So we're not manipulating the state on the client to pretend it's in a different place than if it, yeah. So we're not even to that point where we need to worry about, okay, what happens while we go off and do that? Because that's going to be a part of a discussion, right? When I send to do something here, okay, if I send a command from here and it goes off to do other things, what do? Right? How do I represent the state to the user? These are challenges we're going to come up against, and that's exactly why we're doing this process, right? We're looking at some of these things that you might not consider a problem until you realize that the system is disconnected, but the system is disconnected for the benefit of the greater system. But in doing so, you've actually introduced some problems that weren't problems before. They could be common logic too, depending on. They could be. C# has a very different way of dealing with some of those things. There's different options for how to deal with common logic. They might not be commands. They might be extensions to things. They might be behavioral classes. We might have classes that do some things that we share that logic in. But, one of the things that's going to my actual design process and my actual belief in how to design software is way more chaotic than a lot of people would actually like to deal with, right? Because I do believe in fluid software design. And the challenge comes there in that you can't run ahead and think of things. You can't run ahead and consider what might be, what could be, and plan it out, right? Because if you are truly being fluid with your design, then I don't know what's around the corner. So common logic isn't common until it becomes common, right? But yeah. So when you're designing something like this, that's a little harder to work with, especially if you were working with 7 teams, right? But if we can get this part done, right? So what we're trying to focus on is menu items are copied multiple times, refactor appropriately, right? Because this is a piece that will make a mess, and I don't want to leave it in there for too long, because if we don't fix that problem, then people will copy that pattern and it becomes a problem. So what I was talking about was the idea that we need to make a few more changes to this to make this actually functional as well. So when we publish the menu, it has an object ID, right? That's a MongoDB concept, right? That was to help sort some things out. But when we consume the menu, it doesn't have an ID on it. That needs to change. But what if we're not using Mongo? Right? Now it works because this just consumes what it can match on. It doesn't actually need to do the ID. But we do need some common identifier. We do need something to help us. And by doing what we're doing here and knowing that we're going to turn around and store it in Mongo, a consumer of this, it's easy because we're both the publisher and the consumer right now. It would be easy for us to say, oh, well, that's just a menu. So we just put the object ID on there. And it'll deserialize and it'll be fine. We'll have the object ID. We can just insert it, and we've got the same ID time and time again. We're not going to change this data, right? Because we're not the owner of this data. The menu system is the publisher of menu. So we've leaked an implementation detail, right? We are the publisher and the consumer, but we might not be. And this is what I'm talking about with patterns, right? If I lay that pattern down now, that pattern will be copied right up until the point it's harmful, right? We just saw with the mobile stuff, right? I followed a pattern that I kind of understood. I got to a point and the entire app's broken. So we're going to refactor it. I don't want to lay the pattern down that is easy to follow and very destructive. And ultimately, my storage mechanism here may not be the same as the storage mechanism on the other side. So I don't want to create that commonality. I want to disconnect that commonality and consider these messages to be completely separate, and there's a shared common contract. So I can't publish this object, right? I shouldn't publish this object in good conscience. But I need an identifier. I need a coordinating identifier to be on there. Right, because if I publish a change to that menu, how do you know it's that menu? Actually, I did it slightly wrong. This is the website. On this side, I don't have a menu ID. It attaches because if we use Mongo here, it would store. Sorry, the point is the same. The pieces are wrong. Okay. What I'm trying to get to is, yeah, we created an ID on here so that we could store the menu. Yes, but now we have no coordinating value. Right, we have nothing identifying this menu from any other menu. We also now have this menu, this model copied multiple times. We consume it here, and we consume we pull it out here. So we got the ID here just for the sake of it's referencing. It creates it and attaches the ID in there. So one way of doing this would be not creating a new folder. No, that's not one way of doing it. We can create a new project. Not right now, no. That's going to need to be done. So store the menu when creating a menu management system. Yeah, we're not doing that. And this one actually should be needs to be done before 2 and should dependent Mongo database. If we're continuing on this path, right? So these labels, menu management, and feature, right? So can we do go to full issue, add task list? Oh, nice. Store menu independently of what is published. Create coordinating identifier that is safe to publish. So that is, we need to publish a message, but that message should not contain implementation details about how we store that data, right? Because that's not good. And if you're building the system yourself, well, we can still do some of this refactoring without panicking too much about that change. Well, and that's kind of what I want to do first, and then we can come around on that. So, yes, yeah, we need an identifier that can be consumed from any system, right? We could standardize on GUID. Most software platforms have the concept of the UUID or the GUID. You want something that's indexable, obviously, because any consuming system is going to have to look things up by that identifier. But you want something that's definitely unique. Okay. So you changed. How did you manage that one? How does that compile? Gotcha. You're just trying to break it out. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. I get you. Yeah. Sorry. I missed the part that says pseudocode. Yeah. Well, not necessarily. So basically, there's a few ways to design it. There's actually quite a few things you could do differently in create menu if you consider it, and why saving and publishing don't necessarily need to be the same thing, right? So let's say I go into a screen and say start new menu, right? And I enter some information and I say save, right? That will start the new menu. Then I add a category, and that sends off a command that says add a category, right? And that command is doing this piece, right? And it's adding that category to that menu, right? And then we have add an item. And add item is a command itself that says add an item, and it kind of builds on that. And publishing the menu to Kafka is taking that object and transforming it from the version we store in the database to the version we're ready to publish. Because we might have internal identifiers on these things. We might say, oh, a menu consists of this item and this item and this item. Models in terms of these. That logic should be in a separate folder that implements the interface. How we determine models. A model is the most overloaded term in software development, I believe. I can't think of another term that is more overloaded. We have data models, we have view models, we have models, we have the model, we have all manner of uses of the word model. Models and that's why we kind of come to describe things as details, right? Because those are the things that get passed around. Yeah, we got those models. Models that model models. So, yep. Website engine menu. So you've taken that as an engine. Implement side menu. Okay. Uh, Not necessarily. So the data model, and this is part of why this needs to be done now, right? Is the fact that this is going to be confusing, and we're already demonstrating that there is definitely a mixed usage of these things. Model in this instance is just data. There is no concept. There is no implementation because it is just data. It is a DTO, a data transfer object, right? It's being slightly overloaded in here because it becomes part of the published message. So technically, there's two versions of the model, even in this behavior. And most people struggle with this concept because, well, it's the same thing. So why not just pass it as the same thing? But the challenge comes when you need to change something, right? So when something needs to actually contain different data, you can't just turn around and publish that data again, right? So your use case of something changes, well, then your publishing changes without then going on and creating those models. So setting dangerous patterns in place from the beginning is dangerous. So I'm not sure what engine necessarily represents unless it's like your grouping of the logic and the behavior of the system. Okay, right. So engine being the thing that does all the work. Yeah. So yes, absolutely. Yeah. And again, don't forget, some of this is done purely to get up to the speed with the pieces, so we can start to get the concepts in place, and we can start to build out some ideas. So let's do this. Let's create this work. It will. Okay. Bad feeling. Oh, we're good. Okay. So we're going to create a project, right? And we are going to, right. We want to develop this pizza site, right? And we want to be able to do all the things we're talking about in here, right? But we go at it from a more traditional aspect, a more traditional way of thinking about code, right? So we create our data access layer, and we might have a BLL. Right. And we have our database down here. Right. So this is our UI. And we talk between the pieces, but independently we have, so, you know, we have services, we have that's not actually correct, that's the wrong way around. Don't mind, just don't mind me. All right. Services, clever, all business logic code. Services, and I'm trying to avoid being snotty about any of this. This is our abstraction around a database, right? So this is our, it could be our entity framework. It could be it's whatever we determine is our data access layer to our database, right? So we're keeping some good rules, right? We're keeping our data access away from our business logic. So our business logic doesn't care about how data is stored, just that data is stored, and our UI doesn't care about how things get done. It's just done, right? So we kind of dump those in. So essentially, we're creating our application at this point, and we're building it like that. The challenge is everything in here gets put in classes and behaviors in here, so we end up with folders, right? And we might have a few. We might have we might end up with BLL dot accounting for good organization, right? We might end up with BLL dot customers, right? But ultimately, they're all a set of DLLs, and they're all in one large project or solution, right? And you know, that's the way you might develop things. What we're doing here is pulling everything out into independent components. Now, there might be UIs that wrap up several of the pieces of data, right? There might be components that we need to build to make sure that you can see inventory on hand, and you can see pending orders, and you can see the number of orders you've received in that day. Or, you know, there might be other UIs, there might be other tools. But what we're kind of doing is separating these all into individual responsibilities. So I'm getting to where this breaks up a little bit differently. Now, this design as a monolith doesn't work because it's really, really heavy, and all the logic is bundled essentially together, whether it be in individual DLLs, etc. It's all in one project, it's all in one solution, and it becomes very unwieldy. Right? Now, benefits, you have a common data access layer, so everyone knows how to talk to the database in a certain way. There is logical separation depending on how you deal with these behaviors. You could potentially unit test it if you write these correct from the start, right? But your application is one big chunk of behavior, right? There is no pulling it out. And eventually, because of the way you're designing that, again, introducing bad practices, someone will create a dependency upon a different library, right? Someone will say, oh, well, the BLL customers has this object and the accounting has this object. Okay, so let's just create a reference to accounting. And it might not hurt, immediately, but then accounting has an object that customers uses, and they do that, and you create a circular reference. So then they create extra libraries that make extra mess, right? So part of what we're trying to solve is some of those problems, but also by breaking the system up like this, we end up with independent deployability, we end up with management, we end up with cleaner, more appropriate code in the right places. So logic level, grouping of logic, etc. These right now are folders within one solution, right? So right now, what I'm describing and what I'm showing are slightly different in that technically what I'm achieving is this. Yeah. Models. I don't necessarily like the word model, but it kind of it fits. So what we're doing here is essentially these. If you think of these as mini monoliths, right, and that's why microservices becomes kind of troublesome pretty quick. This is a microservice essentially. It does a thing. Now we might decide that this does only one thing. I'm not aiming this just at what you're doing. I'm just aiming this as a general discussion. Engine menu. Yeah. Right. And what you're describing here, essentially, you could make these commands, right? So current menu push category with items, that could be a command. Command, publish menu, command. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We're on the same track. I'm not doubting that. Just the code and how to lay those things out is some of that's going to be, well, no, most of that's going to be a lot new to you if you're looking at C# code, right? Because it's not something you look at normally, right? So you're applying your way of thinking. Hey, no, it was. So it's okay for this class, these set of class, these classes, these libraries to share certain things because they are part of this library, this world, right? And this might be a solution unto itself, right? I don't want to do that because it makes it really messy, right? For everybody who wants to look at the project, it becomes very messy if you have to check out a dozen solutions, right? So, sorry, I got an itchy nose. They may be, you know, there's a lot of challenges to doing it that way as well. People are not, oh well, I need this solution, I need this project, and you've kind of split it. So you got to. This is why these sorts of challenges now have to be dealt with sooner, because again, you set a pattern. That pattern will be consumed time and time again, because it's the way you did it a year ago, or the way you did it 6 months ago, and just the systems kind of work. So let's just carry on that way, right? I wish I could say that this wasn't from experience that I'm coming, but it is. I've seen it, I've experienced it, and not too long ago, right? Where a decision I made to try and get something practically working is now a pattern. It wasn't meant for that. So, to Junikus's point, we actually probably do want to change some of this a little bit just to make this a little clearer, and then we can start talking. We can really get down to the point of contracts and The model here is data, right? The model is only data here. The model is not a contract. The model is not behavioral. The model only carries data. The challenge is we have the same model used 3 different times. Every item has a category. Well, categories have items. I suppose some of this will be easier if we actually get down to the point of actually the difference between what the data the UI looks like and how it behaves to how we actually store the data to actually how we send the data. Right. So you would store the data for the simplicity of display over simplicity of storage. There we go. Right, but so nothing's saying we can't transform that model, right? And that's another beauty of doing this, right? What we store here can be optimized for storage and readability, right? But what we store here can be optimized purely for its ability to display it, because it doesn't matter here. We can transform it and store it here in a completely different manner as long as we understand how to rebuild it. And the thing is, if that data is published from here, this consumer is never a source of truth, right? So this system has to be ready to throw that data away and rebuild it when it's told, because it doesn't know, it only knows what it knows, right? It can't make decisions upon that data. So the display logic here might not be very pretty, because we might want to lay it out in a different way, but over here we can actually change it, right? Because you could potentially, like you said, you could actually make it so that well, that's the consumer's choice. Each consumer could consume it in a different way. Well, they want to list with different properties, then they can just work with it. Right, but you don't want to. The way we're doing this, right, and that's okay. Each system, each component of the system can make up its own mind how best to consume the data that's published. The system that's publishing it publishes it in the format that is the way that they should be published to be the most understandable. And the most understandable is, here's a menu, it has categories, each category has items. Right? Just because that's not very convenient to display or to work with from a display without the nested for loops. Right? That's up to each individual system to figure out how it wants to store that data. Because and how much that data, again, like I said, I'm publishing all the data, right? All the data that I have that I consider worthy of everybody else, right? Because there could be internal data here as well, right? There could be internal components to that menu that never get published outside the menu service because they are implementation details of that system, but they are associated with a menu internally. What is published is the menu, and a menu is a selection of categories. Each category has a selection of items. Each item has a name, a description, and a value. it will probably be more complex than that, because each item will also have a cost, and there will be all manner of other things, and that data might be fed from inventory or whatever. So this system should not concern itself with how anybody else cares about displaying it. Its only concern is, here's the data. If this system wants to display it in a very quick format, then it consumes it and stores what it needs. Ultimately, these items may have ADs on them as well. We may choose other things, right? And one of the things I'm hoping that we can demonstrate throughout all this process, and I know we're talking about this a lot right this second, but yes, you do. You don't. Your publisher should never consider how the consumer is going to consume it, only that there's information that needs to be published. And one of the things I'm kind of wanting to get to and demonstrate over time is that we shouldn't be scared to change the system. We should be able to change and adapt quickly, and not be fearful of the overall system breaking because of one change in the parts, right? And if we actually start publishing the way this should be displayed, then everyone has to consume it that way, and everyone then takes it as it is. So we don't want to be opinionated about that. We just want to publish data from here. The marketing system might want to publish, come in Tuesday or Thursday, and they see this menu availability, and they say, oh, well, we've got these menus created. We can highlight this, so we need this, and we store this information about it. They might want to store notes against the menu. They might do all manner of different things against that menu. What else? What else could I mean? The menus is a little bit of a weaker link, I think, right now. I think Juniker's has a lot more. Well, Juniker's does, not I think. Juniker's does have a lot more understanding of how this actually works. So this is going to be a weak section. I still don't think models should mirror the data structure in the database. And that's kind of where I'm heading. Is do they need to? Should they? What should we do? How do we do certain things? Right. The simplest thing for right this second, by the way, is a minor refactoring. If we take a new project and we create a, did I create this as .NET 5 or .NET 3.1? Okay. If we create a shared library, right, we can pop these out of here and these out of here. We can consume them, and we only have one library, right? Well, it's a code smell, because if you have a reason for change and multiple things have to change, and that's exactly what the problem we have right here. And I've seen this multiple times, right? Well, it's a problem, right? And if you have, again, the reason for change, if you share that structure and that code, and the models are being passed around in the same structure. So DTOs, yeah, there is a coupling, and that's why I'm saying that we need to make sure that we are repeating this time and time again, because this becomes a pattern, and people will follow this pattern. They won't question it. They won't stop and say, should that be that way? They'll say, oh, well, they did it this way here, so let's do this. We'll just create a new class, and we'll do this, and we'll do this. The pattern will repeat itself, and people will pick it up pretty quickly. So to your point, maybe, so one thing we do need to do is separate what we consume from what we, right? For right now, we're going to do this. We're going to refactor this as consumed models. The reason I'm calling it consumed models is because that starts to break that out. Ultimately, where I'd like to head is building these out of what are they built out of? Avro, schema registry. Okay, so I'm going to create consume models there. We're then going to create another library, good or bad, and we are going to, that's not a console app, that's a class library.net standard. This is going to go into the customer interactions, customer interactions, select folder, and this is going to be interactions.shared. I can't call it shared because I'll conflict with the folder. So for right now, and again, naming of solutions, naming of projects, consistency across the naming of those are things that can change later. We're not irreparably coupled. So now we have the chance to create, and that should be shared. That shouldn't have been shared. I had a different idea in my head when I started that project, that piece. So let's do unload project. Open folder. File Explorer. Customer interactions. Remove. Yep. Interaction is shared. That should delete. Yep. Let's add that again. Class library. And let's go in here, customer interactions. Interactions. Dot models for in a second. Is actually what I wanted to do. And then we're going to take I want to keep them. Ultimately, we will build these models off of the schema registry. We will not have a shared library. Each this is always the problem when you get into when you get into where am I going here? Let me do it in here. It's easier. You end up with input model from the UI, right? And then you have a DTO or a request, and then you end up with a storage model, right? And then you end up with a V model, right? And what happens is you're there, you're there, you're there, you're there. You end up with this model looks like this model looks like this model looks like this model looks like this model, and then someone goes, oh well, they're the same thing, so let's create a model, right? We'll just pass that around. And I've seen this, and then this needs to change, right? Because this passes up a parameter that's specific to the UI. So you change that, but that's specific to the UI. It's like this needs to make a decision as to what it's going to do, or this needs to pass on a decision to the handler as to what it needs to do. So the model isn't quite the same anymore, because you might expose behavior to the customer that internally you need it to be referred to as something different. Well, that's your switch layer, right? That's the UI represents it this way, my system represents it this way. Let's translate the disconnect. So you've got a reason for change. Now your storage model is now, you continue on this change. This might have actually created three different data objects. This might have done all manner of things. So you've got way more to do. But what people will do is just to dump it straight in, because obviously if it's sent in that way, it's easy to store that way because it's easy to retrieve that way, right? and we're scared of that translation. In this instance, if we create this as a consumed models, right? So the consumer consumes it this way. Now these can come from here. Let's just move them as they are for this second. Right? Now, customer interactions knows about storage. It knows what we're doing with how we're storing. It's okay for this to know, right? But maybe I don't want to do that, right? Maybe internally we're going to use GUID, right? Mongo will deal with that eventually. So refactor them. And again, at every stage, what I'm focused on is being able to change this. So like, yeah, eventually you can move it into something where it should be in the library first. We can break these out, and if it's broken apart, we understand the layers a little bit cleaner, then it's easy to change later, right? If it's all stuffed in the code and it's all hidden under layers, it's much harder to change. So we have consumed models. Now we have a chance to say, okay, well, do we want to store these in this way? Right? Because what's consumed doesn't necessarily mean we should store it that way, right? So how would we store that optimized for this system? You might say, right now they do. Right now they do exist in interactions because they are the page, right? So the menus get looped through here, right? I'm willing to kind of, what I'm willing to do, because it's a better example, is to consider how do we want to use them for display, and we'll actually make the interactions models here the storage for optimized for the display action. So what we could do in here is change this to be public GUID menu ID, right? I'm being deliberately could do that. And then in here, when we consume, we don't need to do this. We can actually store a list of items, right? We need the menu ID because we need to know what we're doing, because we actually need to wipe out every single item when we So we've got multiple things going on here, right? What is right for the storage we're using so we can retrieve them quickly? What is right? What might we want to do with these things? Well, does category have an ID? How are we displaying them? How are we storing them? How do we wipe them out? Because ultimately, if we get another publisher of the menu, then we actually need to delete all this data and re-add it all. Is it? I'm hoping this is illustrating some points rather than necessarily seeming just wasteful. And ultimately, the point I'm trying to make here is we have the chance now to consume this in whatever form we need to consume it in, but we have to consider not just how it's displayed. A few for loops isn't going to hurt us, but can we make it better for this system to store the data it needs and not worry about how it's represented from external? So on the screen, we all know what a menu looks like, right? Now, there's other challenges we have with this, right? The menu itself ultimately will contain when it's available, and each consuming system, if a consuming system cares about displaying the menu at the right time or presenting the menu as available or not, then that should be a concern of the system that's consuming it. If it doesn't care, it doesn't care. Consumed models is not the UI. Consumed models, this is a Kafka component. This consumes the data from the stream, from the topics, right? This is consumed from the menu's topic. So the menu consumer consumes menu. That's fine. Interaction models is the storage. And again, the storage doesn't necessarily need to be the view model. Well, is a part of this transformation story specific? Yes, potentially. How we store it could be optimized for how we can retrieve it. We still may need to do different things to make it. But each piece of the puzzle has a different kind of requirement, right? And we have the chance to make it super optimized for each piece if we want to, rather than being generic and dealing with it generically. We can actually change that, right? So let me think. We consume it in the form it was published. If we store it like this, we're actually going to end up grouping by menu name, grouping by category. We can change. We can loop through the items, but then we have to do on category changed, or we have to order it by. Right, so you transform it out of the database into that. You're going to end up with a nesting anyway, because of the way a menu looks, right? A menu is. Don't think about other services. Don't think about other. This is our service. This is our world now. We are the customer interactions team. We've been told about this menu, right? All we care about is us, not other services. Don't consider the larger system. Consider our world. Because our world, we can optimize, we can improve performance. We don't know that it does. We don't know that it does. We're guessing that it does. Why don't we? We deliver the menu agnostic of consumption. We don't. We don't. We genuinely don't care about them. We're not even the people who published the menu didn't care about us, right? Okay, then people over there on that team They said, here's a menu. This is the data format we're publishing in, because it presents all the data that we need to deliver to the system, right? That might have pricing, that might have costing, that might have all manner of features other than just the menu. Our piece of it says, okay, we need to consume the pricing. We don't care about costing. We don't care about barcodes. We don't care about suppliers necessarily. That menu might be way more complicated than just the data that we're seeing. We pick up certain parts of it. They pick up certain parts of it. They pick up certain parts of it. So we don't care. We are consuming our piece. This is not optimizing its output for us. We are only consuming it, and we can store it in the quickest possible way to retrieve it, because we are reading it. We are never updating that data. Apart from the only time we update it is when we get a new menu version of that menu, and we have to wipe out the previous data and re-import the data. We don't want to do a piece by piece update of it. We just say delete it all, add it in. Well, that's technically where this is. Interaction models is DTOs again, right? DTOs that we're going to use to actually store the data into the storage. Yes. And that's a fundamental benefit of doing it this way. Using this system, we can actually optimize every single component of the data for the sake of the system it's part of, not for the larger system. We could have, and this is true of these systems, right? We could have customer exist in the customer system, the account system, the accounting system potentially, the billing system, the marketing system, and the website, right? They're customer no matter where they are. How much information, how we store them, how we use that data is up to every single independent system, but we're talking about customer. And that's why the terms is important. We have to start understanding a menu. When we talk about a menu, we're really talking about a set of categories with items. A category is a group of items, right? Again, I'm not trying to get into the DDD. We're probably going to hit on the concepts. You're probably going to see them. I don't want to necessarily draw the parallels or start down the path of, oh, let me understand if that is, because I think it's useful to do this as is. But so we can store. I know that I wiped out code to do this, right? What I'm trying to distinguish between is what we consume and what we store and what we display shouldn't be the same thing. And that's the pattern we want to kind of create, right? If they look the same, they still need to be distinct. So even if we copy these three into there again, and we store them that way, they are different menus. They are different items. They are different categories. They are different classes. And then when we pull them out of here, we can create a view model that flattens them if we choose to, right? The beauty of doing the Blazor side of things is we can actually consume the object. We can pull the object back out, and then we can do what we need to do and kind of create a class that represents it if we choose to, and does all its manipulation. But anyway, it goes to consume models to storage. Interaction models is where we store the definitions of that storage, and then the view uses interaction models. Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't directly, there's nothing that directly goes into interactions.models because that is just DTOs. They're just definitions of those objects. Let's do this. Just remove that one for right a second. Let's paste them in there again. Just namespaces. You're thinking of this as a flowchart. Here's a menu consumer, right? So watch this. Add a project. So Kafka consumers is now going to gain a dependency on interactions.models. right? It's then going to whine at me at some point that these names conflict because I'm going to add. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to do it this way. Right. So right now I'm storing this value. This value is a menu coming out of the consumer, right? And I don't need to transform that to a storage menu, which is this menu here, right? I've just aliased it for the sake of not having the word menu overloaded multiple times. And let's do this. Let's, on this menu here, this is going to have a public GUID, right? And it's going to have a public GUID source menu ID for the sake of this. Did I? Yeah, no, I did. Yeah. No, I did it a little, brother. If I want to make sure that the compiler is preventing me from moving on while I'm still in mid-thought, I will delete it knowing it's destructive because I know how to put it back. It's just to make sure that I'm picking myself up and not having, oh, why is it not working? I've forgotten about it. It will red squiggle me. Yep. So for right now, what we're going to do is say, we are going to introduce something interesting. Don't worry about it. This menu. This is a cool feature of C# that allows you to add behavior to classes without changing the class themselves. So when it says static, it's a type, but it allows us to create some pretty readable code when there's not much involved. You don't need to start creating adapters and things like that, you know, to change this. I'm just going to do this to put this logic so it doesn't end up in this consumer. It would live somewhere else eventually. But basically what this is going to do is return new storage menu. Its ID is going to be, we're not going to worry about ID for right this second. Yeah. Let's say source menu ID equals grid.newGrid for right this second. We'd have to provide this. We're going to have to talk about how we publish IDs, etc., how we share them. So then name is going to be menu.name. Categories equals menu. So we're going to do using storage category. Again, I'm doing this for the sake of demonstration to either make you go, ugh, that's horrible, here's a better way I can think of doing this, or, oh, actually, that here's a completely different way that actually does work. So I'm going to use a bit of link here to do this. So I'm going to do from C in menu.categories, select new. That was completely accidental. Select new storage category. Name equals c.name, and items equals, so you can't get away from your fours, storage item equals interactions.models.item. This is just one step towards refactoring from I in c.items, select new storage item, And again, I've called them storage X, Y because it differentiates them from the consumed model. Price equals I.price, right? So then here we'll do result.message.value as storage, right? We've now transformed it into a different thing. Well, because you don't want to link the two together. This here should not know about its consumption, right? It has no need to know about how it was consumed, right? And this here doesn't need to know. These models here just know that they're consumed. They don't need to have any change there. So this is just allowing us to add that behavior. So I probably wouldn't call it as storage. I'm just doing this because it's the first thought that stopped me from putting that logic inside of here. So I can move that out. Yeah, right now. Class. Let's just call it that for the second. So that's that one. That's that one. And then we're going to go back over here, cut them out of there. So now we don't even care about referencing this one, right? We just know that we're going to get something back. No. That's me transform. That's not a transform in Kafka. Kafka is very different, right? So now we know we can now have that, and it knows it's a menu internally, but now that logic is separated out there. A Kafka transform is at a KSQL level, and I have a fundamental problem with that. Items are tied to categories, so you could have a category class that knows about its items. That is a me transform, yeah. That's just me trying to make sure that the code is just wrapped up in behavior that is not too convoluted and gets the point across. Items are tied to categories, so you could have a category class that knows about its items. Well, a category will know about its items. A category has a list of items, but it doesn't intimately know about them. It just knows it has a list of items. They are data. I've got a feeling through this discussion, I've got a feeling that we probably do have several areas where once we expand out on some of these ideas, some things will be like, yeah, that's like that. So right this second, we have menu, item, and category in our interactions models. What we're going to do here now is go into our website and add interactions models. And in menus, we're going to introduce menu again from interactions models now. So now there's our for loop, right? So if you give it the categories, it gets its items. Items are all the same category. Right, category doesn't have an ID right this second because we haven't expanded upon on how we're going to build menus. That is a whole different sort of discussion, and that's probably worth discussing in more detail on the issue. Right, so we need this one done before needs to be done before number 2. So right, but what are you trying to save? Right, if category does have a reusability, and a menu can consume, we have a if menu can be compiled from a list of categories that have items, then but again, what are we measuring? Right, if that was tens of thousands of items, that for loop is going to cost a lot of time, right? But trying to be overly clever on your design to try and avoid a few for loops over 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 items, you're not benefiting that. So readability. If by changing the code around to save yourself from those for loops, you make the code harder to understand and the concepts less clear, are you getting readability? Like from right now, from the storage of the data, right, we have a menu. A menu has categories. Categories have items. An item is there. That's an easy path to follow from a understanding of the data. The readability on the code, the display code. Right, but how are you going to display? So if you have a traditional menu, right? So we have the menu is a book, right? What we're talking about is a menu is like early bird. The early bird menu has entrees, desserts, and let's say specials, right? Those are the categories: entrees, desserts, and specials. Another menu may not have. Right, so you're going to hard code the entrees as a thing in your code. You're going to hard code that there's always going to be entrees. So I come along and create the ribs category in the menu system. How are you going to build the UI? Right, but you're so again, we are displaying the menu. They are building the menu. We are not them. What if they design a menu that has new categories on it? You can't hard code entrees in your UI. You have to be able to build a menu dynamically. We're not even going into who owns ordering of menu items, who needs to be responsible for the display. You know, there's all manner of different things. Is a massive rabbit hole just for this thing, which is something really simple, which is a list of items. Assuming, you know, entrees exists as a category on 2 or 3 different menus. The items under the category are different every time. Some of them may be the same, some of them may be different, right? Because that's the idea of those menus. One might be the lunchtime menu, one might be the dinner time menu. Well, baked potato with a prime rib isn't on the lunchtime menu, it is on the dinner menu. But they're both under the entrees category, right? But baked potato could be under the specials, or the prime rib might be under the specials. So the item doesn't necessarily belong to a category. An item can exist in 2 categories at once, and 2 categories can exist on 2 menus. So the problem is who you know, where do you optimize? Where do you it's on 2 categories, it appears twice. But you can't. But I might add the specials category in at a moment's notice. So you're gonna have to group by, and then loop through the groups, and then you're gonna have to loop through the groups, the items within a group. Well, you can't filter because you can't hard code. I mean, the hard coding the menu categories is going to limit you. Well, you actually end up with a query of all available menus, right? And then for each menu, you have to go through each category, and for each category, you have to go through each items. Ta-da! 3 menus. So, and that's kind of right. Where are we going? And again, we are on the real simple end of this, so it might be a little bit harder to kind of conceptualize some of these pieces, and we may have different understandings of what menu means. But you can't optimize your data storage or your publishing method for the display. You don't want to do that. You want to optimize it for clarity of publishing the data, consistency. It doesn't matter whether someone needs to do 3 for loops to go through your list. If the performance matters to them or the readability matters to them, it's up to the individual system to determine how they're going to do it. Oh crap, time. Right, I understand. I mean, I'm not. Yeah, but you can't do, because you can't control. You're not in control of the data. You can't do filter where the category is entrees and then list the items. You can't do that, right? So you're going to have to go through and group by the category. So if you flatten the objects into one object, you're still going to have to group by, and you're still going to have to loop through the items. You're going to have to loop through the groups and then loop through the items. So you're going to end up with your 2 loops, but then you have to loop through your menus. So you've actually not saved anything. So your overall problem there is the fact that we have 3 nested for loops, or 2 nested for loops. But if you had a category view model that did the looping, well, and I think Junica's did kind of from a design's perspective, you can lay this out differently, right? Right. You can do, if correct me if I'm doing anything really crazy. I think we're on the same page. Why did you paste that in there? Take some menu. I don't think I actually want it that way. Basically, menu display. I think that is that, right? And then that takes that, and that outputs h5 menu.name. And then right, but if we carry on with the storage we got now, right, and then we have this is you're not avoiding the nested loops. All you're doing is breaking them up. And then we do then this goes actually that would be there. Okay, there. Then this would be item display. Actually, it'd be items display, but we'll worry about that afterwards. But this becomes is that right? Yeah, so that becomes h4 category.name, and then ul. Actually, then it'd be item display category. The challenge comes from the UL. The thing I always struggle with is the the nested ULs, whether who belongs to what, where it belongs. And this is basically for each var item in items, and then that becomes item.name. Li. So then menu display does category display, category equals category. So now the code's a bit more readable. Menu that doesn't have a category selected. If you think the most component should still the loop's just a component that has a loop internally. Yeah. A loop to show the menu on the left and a loop to show the items in the selected category. Okay. But, I guess that's still the nested for loops, right? You're not getting away from it, but we can tinker with that all we like. But we have a menu display that's responsible for just displaying how the menu is, an item display, a category display, and let's see if it even runs. Boom. Yeah. Because I'm not serializing it. Okay, so let's do this. Let's bring down the system. So that wipes everything out because no storage is saved. Let's bring up the system. Tests would help. Tests would help, but tests would be if you guys want to go to the level of tests, a unit test, then we have to change how I approach the things, because what I want to focus on is some of these design decisions and the pitfalls, and then the technologies we can use, and then why we're using different technologies, and not focus on, okay, now we need to write the tests. If we want to write tests, it's a different approach, and I won't get through chunks of the system. Well, what am I doing wrong here? So I think I'm doing something wrong with how I'm feeding things through. Parameter is the right thing, right? Oh no, it's because of the ID. Okay, so the ID is with oh, I'm not debating the validity of tests. I'm discarding tests right this second because I don't want to have to stress about that. I'm not debating whether they're good or bad. They are definitely good, and if I was doing this system for real, we would have unit tests around some of this stuff already. Account registered, these consumers, they would have unit tests. But the problem with the unit tests is they take a lot of time, design, and a lot of these discussions we're having on the rules and where they should be and how they should be processed, etc. Those are the tests. Those are the things you want to capture, especially when you say it should do this. That's a unit test, or that's at least an integration test if it's a behavior. But anytime you say it should, then you should probably be considering the unit tests involved. It should look like this. It should do this. It should behave like that. We want it to do this when this happens. These are unit tests. What am I doing right now? I'm trying to figure out quickly where I want to do. So the problem is, what I did is I added a GUID ID onto this. And what I probably want to do is that for right this second. Source menu ID, again, we'll talk about what that means and why we need that next time. Did I not just bring that down and then up? I thought I brought it down and up. I don't believe we changed too much. Kafka consumers. Website. Menu website. Let's give that another go. We have a timing issue. Why do we have a timing issue? I didn't change any of that behavior. Menu website, loyalty customers. I think customers might need to start before other things. So one of the challenges with I probably could. One of the challenges with something like mass transit and RabbitMQ is technically things have to tell them they exist. The operation was cancelled. Why? Did it not come up? Is it broken? Yeah, it didn't come up. That's a problem. Do that down again. Well, yeah, if I forgot to actually bring it back up again, that's definitely not going to help. Docker PS -A. I think I'm comfortable that that's all up. Up 4 seconds, up 4 seconds, up 4 seconds, up 4 seconds. That's fine. Start up again. Oh, you're going to error. Broker unknown topic or partition. Broker unknown topic or partition. I didn't change its code. Did I? Kafka consumers. Menu consumer. Broker unknown topic or partition. I did not change you other than this line. Yes. Yeah. So the you should be able to just check it out and run Docker Compose Infra, and it'll bring you up your Kafka and Docker and Mass Transit and RabbitMQ, etc. RabbitMQ. Mass Transit is a library layer, not an actual service. Menu consumer. So it's erroring on here. But I did not change this. RabbitMQ is up. Let's add a cluster. Local Z. No. Topics. Shouldn't matter. They should create. So basically, Kafka shouldn't be as sensitive to topics not existing. It should kind of create. Sorry. The red stop you will see because that's where it's telling. I think I clicked that. I think I actually clicked that one. And what's going wrong is the Kafka configuration is starting up saying, hey, I need the customer interactions. Oh no, hold on. Subscribe to menus. Menus doesn't exist. But Kafka doesn't really have the concept of. So the menu website is where we publish the menus from, right? Kafka doesn't really have the concept of kind of ordering. Mass Transit, if you start things in the wrong order and it's not registered its intent yet, then it will error because it, you know. Not in as I mean it does, but not in those terms. The concepts, yeah. So C# you'll tend to see link statements or link code or there's two styles when people say link. Link is either sorry, stomach. Actually, here. So this is link, language integrated query, where I can select from and then filter out. So I can add where c dot name not equal to Bob, right? That will get me all the categories that don't have a name of Bob. And then I can transform them. So I'm selecting out the new thing. Another way you'll see this is you can also do menu.categories.select or menu.categories.where c goes to c dot name equals Bob. Select reduce aggregate. Yeah. Yeah. So you can chain them as this is still link. It's just this builds underneath these. They'll translate. They're all expressions. I kind of prefer the quick from X where because it helps you can see it at a glance. But if I'm building certain things, I like the dot syntax stuff. Map is select reduce aggregate where equals is filter. Yeah. Yeah. Kafka doesn't require them. I've not come across this. Let's do it this way. Let's go to set starter projects. Let's not start that one. Let's run the system up. We have no menus. HTTPS localhost 5002 is our menu system. So we create menus, and let's create this as the the early bird menu. So now if we go over to not there, not there, CMAC. We have menus. Now let's start that service up. I don't think I've come across this. Yeah, it's working. So now if we go back here and go to menus. Huh. That's weird. I've not seen that before though. That's puzzling me because one of the benefits I've always thought is, I suppose it makes sense. The topic can be there, but the system doesn't need to consume it. The thing is, yeah, I suppose it does. With mass transit, you kind of have to register intent, right? So mass transit says, "Hey, I care about that message." You have to get there before a message is produced, right? So what if the producer starts up first, then the consumer starts up. The consumer misses the first message or misses whatever message because the producer could be producing messages and the consumer wasn't there to listen to them. With Kafka, the producer can produce and the consumer can come up afterwards. So how do you handle a null return? Right now, it doesn't handle anything because it's not built for resilience. It's built for demonstration. So now it starts. So now I can add it in. But that's a frustration I don't want to have. Website. Okay, that's the error. Okay, that's fine. So why did that error? That errored because element ID does not match any field. BSON map. Okay, so refresh, website, menus, documents, view documents. So this is how we store the menu, right? So the ID there's our source menu ID randomly. That's, even though we're storing it as a GUID, Mongo is serializing it itself. So the menu's there. And what we're pulling out is the actual menu. Right, because we're actually saying, okay, go and get me all the menus. This menu is that menu. Why is it complaining? Element ID does not match any field or property of class interaction as well. Right, because we don't have ID. Oh, okay. We gotta have the ID there because it's got to deserialize it back, and it's trying to match it against an ID because it doesn't make sense for the model that you're actually pulling it into to not have ID. So let's do this. So we broke before because we had ID. Now we're breaking because we can't read ID. Right. So sadly, back down you all go. And they have to go down again because they've got data in there that's now bad, that if I try to consume it, it'll break because I've got to change. So some of this you've got to work out. What we can do here, though, is we can say, and I think, if memory serves, this was deprecated, wasn't it? MongoDB set GUID ID. I think how you do it changed. What I don't want to do is put BSON ID in there, unless I have to, because that means that our interactions models right now has no dependencies whatsoever, right? So it is primary key, and it'll default it. It'll create an underscore ID field whether we like it or not. It's just when it's reading it back out, it doesn't have anything to map it to, and then fails because it needs something to map that field to. So there is a way in the library, and I think we've been through this before. What I'm trying to avoid doing is using object ID or BSON ID, because what we can do is you can set this attribute, which tells it to use it as its own internal. But the biggest problem I have with that is then our interactions models become Mongo specific. Is that bad? Avoid boils. Beast, avoid absolutes. Avoid song about James. Wow, I have not typed them. The deserialization of the model from Mongo to C#. That library is requiring the ID be deserialized as something, and I don't have a deserialized for it. Avoid BSON ID in C#. Mongo. ID serialization. So you can do BSON ID. Yeah, it looks like. I think for the sake of, we know this is Mongo. We're not pretending this isn't Mongo. What I'm trying to avoid is this. I'm trying to avoid a hard dependency on the Mongo library. Installed. Right. So now if we do that and install that, accept. And what they're saying is we can go here and say VSON ID, VSON representation. I think they... Yeah, I need to start linking see, internally it'll actually make ID what did that do? String object ID. We don't want that. Object ID is another alternative. Object ID is their own class for ID. So I got to learn how to do that properly. I think, if memory serves, that will actually do what we want. So let's bring them up once more, and then we'll finish up. So start that up. There we go. Yeah, it's... I've always had an issue with making my model libraries, data store libraries, actually... It comes from having to change databases where the objects transfer, but the reality is you never really do that. Early bird. Right, so we know that's published. We know there's no menu in here now, right? This is failing because, well, it's not failing now. It's just got no data. Yeah, you have to tell it how it's, and this the libraries have different. So Mongo has a different ID mechanism, and you used to be able to specify at the Mongo level, oh, use C# GUIDs when you're serializing your data. But I think we found out last time that's not possible. Now they took that away, which is probably right. But now adding the attributes is kind of the way to tell it. But now we've got a Mongo library dependency in there. So there we go. There's our menu. All that for the menu. All that to get back to where we were. Right. So we can go over here and we can add the specials menu. Right. Go back there, and now we've got the specials menu. Right. So we're functionally the same. What we've actually achieved is we now don't have 3 copies of these files lying around everywhere. We do have we do technically have 2 copies lying around. Well, 3 copies lying around, but we've organized them in such a way that they are distinct. We have shared them. We've not created that extra copy. The website itself now no longer has a copy of those files. Not uncommon. Not uncommon. Time management is often focus as well, depending on what you're doing. So, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to commit this to the branch. We're not going to merge it right this second. So I'd advise, if you want to have a tinker with this, if you want to see what it is, how we did it, see if you have any different ideas. Yeah. Nice. I'm glad you did. I'm glad you got something from this. That's the overall goal with this entire project. It's not, again, take what you need from it. If the lesson is, oh, I don't like the way they do that code, that's okay. Okay, so let's get this committed. So what we did is added more definition to those models, right? We made sure that they have a purpose and that they live in a place where it's clear what they're doing and not just that they're the same models, right? That was the key there. So that they are different models. They can behave differently. We could store them differently. The storage mechanism doesn't matter to the consumed model. The consumed model only needs to consume what it needs from the topic. Models to add clarity. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, the problem with engineering jobs in a lot of times is if they have an HR department, then it's buzzword bingo. Yeah. Consume models, stored models, and reduced. Better. So ultimately, what we might want to do is take what we actually store in the database and create a view model to consume that, so that we're actually not even consuming even the same stored model. Yes, it's another set of models, but it means that we can potentially put some of that logic into that view model, because the view model could potentially have some help methods to help it display things differently, or to do the grouping or whatever. So you could actually behave slightly different even in the view models here. Right now we're still consuming the model from the database storage and putting it in there. That's fine. Anything you do, if you want to do a pull request just to review it, to look at the difference, that's fine. Don't assume that every pull request gets merged, because that could create trouble. There's a lot of things that we can go forward with. And if you have any ideas, like I said, if you have any thoughts, ideas, add some issues if you want to. The Discord is always there. I do keep quite a close eye on it. As might have been apparent, I was playing Assassin's Creed when you and Mr. Anholm were going back and forth the other day. But I'm always happy to discuss this stuff. If you're interested in taking a look, I'd be interested to know how your UDDD book read goes as well. And we'll continue with this next Tuesday. Next Tuesday will be before Thanksgiving. We're fine. Try to define the boundaries between consumer models, store models. Added library for shared models between customer interactions. Yep, I'm about to raid out. So thank you for joining me, Dota. Appreciate being here as always. This branch is now pushed up to there, so you can have a look at what we did this evening. Feature 3 is there, so there's more code there. Does it automatically detect anything there? Don't think it does. That'd be awesome if it's like, oh, you call feature 3, I'll pick you up. Okay. So any questions? anything to before we go? Anything I'm missing before we go? Has this hopefully it's been helpful or at least thought provoking? That's the best I would hope for. Some level of thought provocation. We're gonna go over there. So, okay. Well, if there's nothing else, then I'm gonna raid over to Finance Singularity again. I will be back on Thursday with some mobile stuff. We're probably gonna start the refactor of the app to use, or the rebuild of the app to use Prism. So that'll be Thursday, and there will be a Saturday stream this week. I Genshin the whole time. Nice, cool. Well, enjoy. I will hope to manage to actually get into one of your streams again soon. It's either when I've been available, you've not been streaming, or I've just been so wiped out. So yeah. But okay. Well, thank you for joining me. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Good night, all.